Contracts really are supposed to be reflective of an understanding between two parties. It serves the purpose too of minimizing misunderstanding, because a man might be walking past your studio when you're doing a hit song, or a song which eventually becomes a hit. And 20 years down the road, in the retelling of that story, he was in the studio when you were making the song.
Yeah, man, I give him the line, man.
Right? Because and sometimes it's not because people intend to lie, but the memory is very creative. And so that is why contracts are important, because
that's a nice way of saying it. That's a nice way of saying it.
Hey, we have a Steve that one there, though. You have a very creative memory, you know, sir. You have a creative.
Welcome back. Common sense. Make it make sense. And indeed, this episode is making a lot of sense. We have Clyde Mckenzie here. Clyde, I tell you, you've been giving us some information that is definitely needed. We could not get those information just by common sense, so we have to applaud that. Your story is quite compelling, and I can also relate to your story as in, me in the music business and how we started out reading contracts. And me and Jackson started a company dealing with the contracts and all of that. But with that said, what do you think about the culture, quote unquote culture, that we have currently in dancehall, where the word contract is seemed a bit too rigid and persons focus on, I'm a virgin man, just I work with them when I need no contract, this is a mindset. And then later on you see, a lot of different misunderstanding and who believe that they weren't treated right and so forth. Do you believe that it's a must, once you're going in any form of agreement, musically, a contract is necessary? And why?
All right. There are two schools of thought. One is that if there is not a commitment to the principles enshrined in the contract, it's not worth the paper it's written on. Right? In other words, that there must be a desire and a will to fulfill the warranties and the obligations enshrined in the contract. That said, a contract serves a number of purposes. One of them, it is a record of a supposed understanding, because remember, sometimes people sign contracts and they say, but this is not what I thought it meant. This has happened, and that's why lawyers get rich, because sometimes people argue that they didn't understand, and there are provisions in many of these contracts for people who might have signed under duress or under force. And so contracts really are supposed to be reflective of an understanding between two parties. Now, as I said, it usually serves the purpose too of minimizing misunderstanding, because you see, what I've learned in music is that a man might be walking past your studio when you're doing a hit song, or a song which eventually becomes a hit. And 20 years down the road, in the retelling of that story, he was in the studio when you were making the song.
Yeah, man, I give him the line, man.
Right? Because and sometimes it's not because people intend to lie, but the memory is very creative. You see? And what happens is that in many instances, in the reconstruction of what happens, we tend to have a different kind of version than that which actually took place. And so that is why contracts are important, because
That's a nice way of saying it. That's a nice way of saying it.
Hey, we have a Steve that one there, though. You have a very creative memory, sir. You have a creative.
you see,
I like that one.
and so we have to appreciate that, because of that tendency for us to burnish history and usually retell it in our own favor. It is important that you have something, a record that, sometimes can withstand scrutiny, to say, but this is what you agree to, man, and that. So a contract is really important. But we don't come from a culture of contracts, because we tend to be vibes driven. And what you find is that in many instances, me and my brethren, I will just make a tune. And when we do that, nobody decide to determine what the split's supposed to be on that particular song. And then 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, you hear, boy, it's me to write that song alone, and you want to come take claim to the song. And, people are not able to secure the kind of benefits from their contribution or their perceived contribution that they should. And this is a problem. So contracts are important, because it's a record, that can withstand scrutiny, especially if it's properly constructed.
All right. Appreciate that response. Let me ask you though, because you said, at a very tender age, you have gone through so many contracts, what is the most common contract that you see cause a lot of different view? You have the 360, the record label.
Well, 360 is really a fairly novel approach to the business. And when I say 360 is really novel, that came about because streaming is not as lucrative as, say, the sale of a CD or the sale of a vinyl record. What you used to have in days gone by was you had a situation where Tanya Stevens has a song which talks about it, where you buy one album and it's only one song deep. Everything else is fluff and foolishness. But you would pay $20 for that album. Now, that kind of situation where you could make a lot of money. I saw the decline of the record industry and the record companies and the influence and the power of the record companies. I saw the decline of that in real time. I remember I would travel first class to LA, courtesy of the record label. Virgin wanted me. So every 2 weeks, Virgin would fly me out to LA, and I would stay at Le Parc or Le Montrose or any of these fabulous little hotels. And anywhere I'm going, it would be first class. Me and the artist travel first class until that. After Napster and those things, there was a decline in terms of those offerings, where after a while they would be asking you to pay your way to go. So they would, first of all, make sure that you're not traveling first class. And so, you'd see that kind of deterioration in the treatment that you were getting. You understand? Because the money wasn't coming in as they used to. So there has been changes. And one of the things that the record companies started doing was this 360 arrangement, was they started saying, well, you know, because we're not getting enough from the sale of recorded music, give us a little piece of your publishing, give us a little piece of your merchandising, give us a little piece of your touring. And in that way, they were able to give you
man,
a
piece of the
deal,
tour, yeah, man.
you know, because they want a little piece. Once it was just about your record sales, that's what a label would sign you for. But I mean, if you sell 1 million records or you sell even 500,000 records, then the record company at $20 per unit, you know, the record companies weren't doing too badly, you know, because the record companies, they really operated on what you call the 80-20 principle, which is the approach that venture capitalists take, that 20% of the business in terms of record sales is going to take care of 80% of the other business. So in other words, you look at 80% as a loss and 20%, the top 20%. So if you have a great artist who who sells well, then he takes care of all the artists
Everybody
who did
else.
well. That was the principle that they worked on, right? But after a while, when you see the kind of money that they would be getting from streaming and all of that, they decided that they needed to find other ways to bolster their earnings. And what they did was they would ask for other areas of earnings for the artists. So they started asking for other pieces of the pie. So that's where the 360 came in. But those things are, you know, you need to look at them and see how they work. And, you know, there are many of them have advantages and disadvantages. I mean, the record companies, they designed their business to ensure that, again, they would not incur too many losses or too much losses in the business. So even although they would fit the artists and treat them and their managers well and all of that, they try to ensure in terms of the deals that they would strike with the artists. Because, you know, you as the artist, your artist royalty will be like 10% of the sales, you know, of the record, you know, and you would have to pay a lot of the cost of the recording and all of that out of your 10%. But that's the way the record labels structure the deal in order to ensure that they didn't lose money in any real way. So we might look at artists and say, boy, they make some big money. But when you imagine what the record companies were earning, then you understand. And this is where now the argument as to whether we should have made more investments in terms of distribution, because what would happen is that in the main, we were involved in the creation of the music and the production of the music, but the marketing, which is the more lucrative end of the value chain, really resided outside. So, I mean, the artist who is from here gets 10%, but the 90% goes to the record label, who really is investing money in the artist. But if you had Jamaican people who could find the money to invest in the artist and put them out there in the way that Atlantic Record was able, in conjunction with VP, put out Sean Paul. If you had a Jamaican company, well, VP is Jamaican, although it is not resident here. But and to be honest, one of the things is that the greatest successes we have had in the music usually are with Jamaican owned or Jamaican associated labels. Bob Marley did well with Island Records, which was a Jamaican associated label. So even though Chris Blackwell is an Englishman, Chris Blackwell spent most of his life and childhood
in Jamaica.
Right. So he understood the Jamaican culture. I mean, Island was a rock label, and if you notice, he was able to spice the Marley's efforts with rock influence when you listen to the guitar riffs without actually doing any violence to the underlying structure of the music. But he was able to make it attractive to people.
I still maintain
outside without actually doing any kind of damage to the identity of the music. So that was very important. And VP Records has been able to do that because the Sean Paul, the Beanie Man, and many of these projects that have had success in the United States has been as a result of the efforts of a VP Records. Because again, they understand the culture, they know the nuances about us and our music. And so they are really conversant with the mechanics of marketing for us and marketing our music. And that
pick up in right there, right? Is it that labels have moved away from signing artists and now signing just albums or so forth?
Well, that too is part of the thing. I mean, people now will take a song, they'll take a couple of songs. The labels are not in the kind of long-term commitment and development of artists as in the days of yore, in the sense that in the past, I could speak to one of my contacts at one of the big labels and said, boy, I have this artist in Jamaica and him blowing up and things really happening for him, and music bad. And if the artist had some good recordings, I could pass it on to the A&R man and he would listen and maybe you could sign the artist. Now that is different. I mean, any kind of deal that they're going to have would be with a well-established act.
You'd
have to have something already happening for you. They're not going to be going into the business of spending.
Not taking any chances again.
Yes, from scratch. No, they're not into that. They will take on a project if they see that it has a life of its own. And they have ways of checking. No, without having to come here. I mean, they can determine that the Shazam maps, and they have the Shazam maps and things that they can see what is lighting up where you can't fool them anymore. So that's very important.
All right, so one of the very simple contracts that persons, Jamaican artists, producers, etc., don't really even take in consideration is that simple one that is called a split sheet.
Well, a split sheet, you see, because in the heat of the moment, when many people, them lick off them one another fist and think, why a wicked tune. and so in that period of creative fervor, many people think it would be out of place to come and say, but all right, 50% for you and 50% for me. But I think what should happen is that you don't necessarily have to have that agreement with the artist. Their management should perhaps be on hand to quickly arrange what is the proper split so that you don't have problems going forward. So in a lot of instances, I think artists should have their management playing a more active role in a lot of the things that are being done. Because let them get the bad name. and you and your brethren as the other artist or the songwriter or whoever, you and that person, you and your fellow creatives, you are all right together. Make
Yeah,
the
man.
management,
Just
make the
setting some
management,
wire management, you know, man. I saw them stay, man. I'm
yeah, make
like
the
the
management,
paperwork, man.
make the management be the monster.
But
That's what he's paid for.
but with this, with the split sheet and so forth, we see a lot of times that artists lose their master. There have been talk about when you record your song at a studio, you pay for your recording or etc. It's best to then get that file and ask them to delete um the song on the system. Is that the approach? Is could you give more clarity to that for artists that are watching, or musicians, producers, etc.?
You should always try to be in possession of your master. I mean, that is as an artist, that is a role your management should play. That, I mean, this is my master. We recorded this song, and I mean, sometimes it might not be wise to erase the music. Um, it also depends on who actually owns the master, because in a lot of instances, it's not the artist who owns the master. The master is owned by the producer, who might be the man who owns the studio, right? So in a lot of instances, you, the artist, will not own the master. You are a performer on that master. And if you're a songwriter, you have songwriting credit. So yeah, the master is owned. But in point of fact, I've always, when people ask me who or what is a producer, I tell them that the producer is the person who owns the master.
I was just about to go into that. Because in Jamaica, yeah, as I said, a lot of us do things on a vibes basis. And there's no one don't know the difference between a manager, a producer. So as it relates to the role towards they play towards the artist, what does the producer role should be via the manager?
In many territories, the producer and the manager can't be the same person. That is almost a
Could you repeat,
conflict.
could you repeat that again for me, please?
In many territories, the producer and the manager can't be the same entity or person, because that is seen as a conflict of interest. But you need to separate the roles.
Explain.
Because of the size of the market in Jamaica, we tend not to have the kind of division of labor that we would in other territories where you have a bigger market. So if I have a major act in the States, I, more often would be his manager, and he would go to some producers, and the producers would deal with creating music for him. I might hire a producer, or a producer might come and say, well, okay, I strike a deal with a producer. And let me even qualify hiring a producer. Let me make a distinction. When Sly Dunbar was down by Channel One, and he was creating records for Channel One with the Channel One imprint, most people would say that Sly was producing the song, because Sly was the arranger, and he was, in many instances, the composer of the thing. But Sly did not become a producer of these songs that he was doing until he started releasing on his own taxi label. Because what was happening is that Sly was an arranger for Jojo Kim at
Channel 1.
Channel 1. But
So it was an employee.
Yes, technically. So
Yeah.
I mean, so a lot of people conflate arranging and engineering with producing, and some people are all in one, like a Dave Kelly, and produce in the sense that he engineers, he does everything, arranges and everything, mix and thing, and I say, well, in produce, but the real production, as far as Dave is concerned, is the fact that he owns the master. He could have done all of that, and if somebody else was financing the project, that person becomes the producer, and he would be a man who would be credited for other things, So a lot of people,
That's interesting.
There's a misconception as to who the producer is, because many times we say if a man
Make the
beats or make the records, then I mean he's a studio musician, he's the arranger. I mean Jackie Mittoo was big as far as Studio One and Sir Coxsone, but Jackie Mittoo was not the producer, he was the arranger. Ernest Ranglin, he arranged My Boy Lollipop, the first Jamaican million seller. But it was Chris Blackwell, who might not have been in the studio at the time this record was being made, who is the producer. So the producer don't have to be in the studio when when the song is being made. He just has to own the master.
So is it that we have a lot
you talk to 9 out of 10 musicians sometimes, and them don't understand that distinction.
Mm-hmm. That's why I bring it up, because it's important. But we have seen a lot of cases where persons don't know the difference, and it causes a lot of problem between their associates. But in some cases as well, we see where artists also in the business say, probably, they hear the song on the radio or the song on YouTube or push views and then not make the money. Is it that a lot of persons do go ahead and sign up on platforms, but they don't really have a publishing? And how publishing help an artist?
Well,
a publishing company.
A publisher is really a person who collects on behalf of a songwriter, right? Songwriters, composers, authors. That's what a publisher is supposed to do. So, for example, a publisher, you talk about mechanicals. When you sell a record, the portion of the money that goes towards the songwriter, that is handled by publishers. Publishers also are in the business of selling songs. So a publisher will try to get your song in a movie, try to get your song on a soundtrack, try to get your song in a commercial, try to get your song sampled, try to get your song
on the playlist
covered, right? His job is to ensure that you earn money as the songwriter. So, I mean, there are things that are called performance rights. So, example, every time a song is played on the radio in Jamaica, a songwriter is supposed to get some money, right? And that money is really handled, sometimes it is handled by what they call some collective management, management organizations, same as like JCAP and these entities that will manage the performance rights side of your business. But the mechanicals, for example, when the unit sales from recordings are sold, the mechanical royalties to the songwriter is usually paid, the money is usually paid to the publisher, and then the publisher takes a portion of that money and hands it over to the artist. Because you see, the publisher is in the business of collecting money from all over the world, right? They collect money from all over the world on your behalf as the songwriter.
Clyde, you're saying that majority artists out there that are complaining, they are missing a big bulk of their money because a lot of them don't have a publisher?
Yeah, maybe they don't have a publisher. If you don't have a publisher, then you're going to have problems collecting.
Because I won't call a name, but I remember a singer.
If you're the song, I we're talking now, we want to make a distinction between the artist and the songwriter. Now, you get artist royalties, which is different for being a performer on a particular song.
And the songwriter.
That's the artist royalty. That is different now. That is different from what you get as a songwriter. Now, the songwriter's portion is what is handled by the publisher.
Exactly. Because I remember instant I was about to tell a story. I won't call the name. A known artist, from a veteran artist. He said back in the days, they used to actually sing songs, and when they go to the different producers, quote unquote, they sing songs and they give them a little change, and they're glad for the change, and the song play all over the world. And they don't really have any publishing. They didn't sign up their name. They didn't do anything to actually collect from it. What they profit from was the fame, and the fame bring the shows. You know what I mean?
That's true too. And again, we talk about the shows and the importance of the shows, because that is where some of these artists would make any money at all, because they wouldn't be making money from the sales of the recorded products. With these producers, the producers just pocket the money in some instance.
Let's just say they were creative.
Right. So in some instances,
creative collecting.
And then, but you also have to remember that in certain instances, producers will tell you, because many times artists have their producers, who is their brethren, become their managers, who they see as their benefactors. So an artist doesn't understand that if I am your manager and I arrange for you to get a car, it is a loan that you have been advanced. It's money you have been advanced. And that money must be taken from your future earnings to pay me back. Now, most people believe that when your manager give you money or anything like that, that you don't earn out of his pocket, that's a gift. And that's why you hear a lot of people talk about being robbed, because they don't take into account that they have been given money without their taking note of the significance of that money that has been given to them. They might not have taken note of the fact that this person has been spending money to record them, to promote them, which that is money coming out of the person's pocket. And the person is at some point going to want to see how they can recoup their money from you. And this is why it is problematic to have managers being producers, because you get into conflict of interest. How you determine what the artist should get as the producer, as opposed to being the manager. How do you negotiate with yourself? If you have a song, or you producing a song, and what kind of deal do you strike with the artist, especially if you are his manager? Are you double dipping? You see?
Yeah, if you say that, but I've seen cases where a producer, quote unquote producer, went died, and for example, I don't remember I don't have a clarification, but I think Conscience did a song that went huge, but it's a case where, like him and other artists, the person paid the artist.
There are buyouts too, You have to
pay the artist. So the
Buyouts.
artist charge them to voice.
I
Does
mean,
the artist have to
underneath
charge
it,
it?
no,
Go ahead.
underneath, yeah, you can have buyouts. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I mean, I don't think I'm really telling any real state secret when I say that Lady Star with underneath it all, it was a buyout where she had an agreement that with no doubt
Gwen
that she would
Stefani.
not, and Gwen Stefani, and no doubt that she would not share in the future earnings of the song.
Mm-hmm.
She would just want a lump sum, and that's it. Now, the wisdom of that people will question because underneath it all became a massive hit.
Massive hit.
Which if she had taken royalties from that, I mean, she'd still be counting.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But so yes, there are buyouts. So and as I said, there are advances sometimes that people give you, you know. So
So the
again,
clarification I was looking for,
again,
though.
and again,
Mhm.
what has been happening to make things worse in Jamaica? There's supposed to be a distinction between your management, your producer, and your record label. In many instances in Jamaica, your artist is your manager and your record label. You see how right that is for conflict. And that is why you have so many disputes in the Jamaican music space.
Yeah, so I was saying the clarity that I'm trying to get, though, because I've seen this trash out a lot of times where a producer say, "Yo, I'm pay you for the song, Bridget. One of my pay him, deserve the rights. That's I pay for the song."
No,
Mhm.
no, because one of the things, and that depends upon the deal that they've struck.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for example, if you give me an advance to record the song, it doesn't mean that I should not have any claim on future earnings from the song.
Mm-hmm.
It means that you give me an artist advance, and dependent on how the record sells. If the record sells more than what you have given me as my artist advance, I mean to recover or recoup whether my 10% then,
Mm-hmm.
it sells so well that my 10% in this song far exceeds the 5,000 US dollars that you give me. I mean, if I were to get royalties based on the sales of that record, I'd perhaps get 25,000. Then the point I'm making is it would be incumbent on the artist and his management to sign a deal to say, well, this is a buyout, a one shot deal.
And
Or
that's how the
whether,
contract comes in.
or
Yeah.
yes, or whether this is an advance. I mean, on future earnings. Now, you might find that when you really get right down to it, the record did not sell enough to cover the $5,000 that was given to you as an advance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your 10% wouldn't cover that, in which case you would be unrecouped. In the traditional approach, what would happen is that record companies would say they cross-collateralize your deal. So if this album don't recoup, then they try to get the money that they should have from that album, plus the money that they should have gotten from the next album. So they add the two albums' money together for the second album. And if the third, that's how it goes, right?
It's definitely a risk.
Yes. So
Just
and
like
what
any
they
other
do,
investment.
what they do is they're into the risk mitigation business.
Mm-hmm.
So if they don't get back their money from this first album, they're going to try to get it back from the second one. You
And,
know.
and 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 that's why I said the contracts are very important, because a man will pay an artist and the artist give the song and don't want to post it on their Instagram and etc. So it's very important that when you're approaching this as a producer or whatever, you must sit down with the the manager
Well,
of the artist and go
I
through the
mean,
steps.
and you would know this even dealing with your podcast, that there's a difference between being granted the rights to record something and being given the rights to distribute something. And a lot of our producers here don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I can give you 10 tunes, come and record them in your studio. But if I didn't give you the right to distribute or release them, you are not supposed to release them. You are in breach if you do that, because I didn't give you permission to release them.
So the common thing that we hear dancehall artists are saying that producers just go ahead and drop a song without even speaking to their management because
No, well, that is because of the ignorance on the part of the artists and their management, because you're not supposed to, that is not supposed to happen without the consent of the artist.
all right, so we know dancehall is not selling as the other genre. Someone who is listening right now who wants to become an artist and he see the quote unquote the bling life. How does he expect to actually make money from music being a dancehall artist since slash reggae when the business is not that,
The bulk of
productive?
his income, I think he's going to try to make from shows.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to want to be able to score some songs, make him very popular. And once that happens, then he's going to move towards getting and securing live events on which he performs. That is the real source of his income. Now, many of the artists are going to try to promote themselves online, and many of them have been successful. The influence of the radio jocks has waned significantly. So you find that gone are the days when, the radio people were idolized. They still have respect and they still have influence, but not as much as, one would expect. Now, the thing is, you have to bear in mind that in this digital environment, people believe that, you had the opportunity to circumvent the middleman in the business because you could go directly. First of all, you didn't need much by way of a producer in the studio because you fix up your thing right in your bedroom and you put it out there and you deal with your distribution. So you deal with your production and your distribution. Well, there are two things that happen to be wrong with that approach. Mind you, some artists have managed to secure a considerable amount of attention through that, because what happens is that sometimes they do a one production by themselves and it gets a little attention, somebody sees it, and it starts attracting some producers and established people, and the thing takes on a momentum of its own. But we have to remember that now that we have 3 million artists instead of 3,000, what you have, by lowering the barrier to entry, what you do is you have not provided people or the audience with more choice as you might think. And what has happened in many instances, the people just stick to the tried and proven. So you're being an upstart and a newcomer in the business, and you figure you can circumvent all of the channels and just become a hit. It doesn't work that way. What has happened is that in many instances, when people have 100,000 choice, they stick to the few choices
Yeah, the
that they know,
attention span
rather
is
than,
much shorter.
Go to the name brand.
it's like if you go into a restaurant, and you say, boy, you can get oxtail and rice and peas and, stew peas and thing and thing and thing. You might become confused and you might leave the restaurant without buying
You
anything.
just buy fried chicken.
Or, you understand?
So that would mean that gatekeeping is necessary then?
I think, people have found out that gatekeeping had an essential function. The fact that, people were able to decide and determine what was good and what wasn't in terms of quality and all that. People depended on that. No, and sometimes that power of gatekeeping was abused, But the fact is that people were very reliant on that.
Well, that sense of quality control type of
Yes, it had some quality control mechanism within it. Now you have a situation where,
everything is out there.
everything is out there. You start seeing all the people on the streets selling, as opposed to, these established restaurants or shops that you start I wonder if this money thing really any good, or I wonder if. And in some instances, they aren't very good because they don't have, and we have to understand that music and creativity, there's a vibe thing, but there's also a knowledge thing that is necessary. And so, the technology now allows you to cobble a few songs together, and some of them might have a semblance of order and structure to them. But when you go to a big studio and you spread out that song on a big board, you start seeing all the deficiencies, the structural deficiencies.
It's empty. It's empty.
You understand? And so people don't gravitate towards the stuff. So those are challenges that we face in the music, because there is the quality control issue, and as you said, the gatekeepers they played an important role and had an important function.
With that note, we're going to take a break, and Q will just set up the wrap up, because trust me, the knowledge that you're giving us, I think we need 2 episodes for it. We don't want to ace the knowledge because it's really meaningful, and persons definitely want to know. So, Kommon says fraternity. We'll take a break and we'll be back. Questions with Q and Clyde.
Common sense make it make sense. Now, we're here with, I would say, a man behind the music, or a man who helps to create the culture of the music. What did you call this gentleman right here?
He's a legend.
Jackson.
Yeah, man, definitely legend. Definite legend. Legend of the business.
No, it's an honor to have you on the show with us tonight. It's definitely an honor. It's a definitely honor. You are a mentor to the music fraternity. And a lot of people hear the name. Vibes Cartel sing about it, analyze them like Clyde Mckenzie. But most people don't know who you are. So it's an honor for have you on Common Sense. Does that make sense?
Well, I wouldn't quite say that most people don't know exactly who I am. In the sense that, I'm well identifiable in the public. Most people, they see me on the road, they know who it is, which is unusual for somebody who is not a performer, So I wouldn't say I'm really not known, but I think I know what you're saying, though.
So you know just some of the things. So what I'm trying to
what
say
they don't know, a lot of people might know me, they see me on television a lot and so on in the public space.
Right.
But a lot of people don't know what exactly I do.
Exactly.
That is it.
I think that is really. So I think what that's what Nikki was really going at. That
exactly.
I'm easily recognized in Jamaica, But the thing is, they don't know. A lot of people, I mean, I used to have a running joke, you know, when the kids would be asked by their schoolmates, so what exactly does your dad do? You know, we see him on TV all the time, but what's exactly is, I said, tell him I'm a hustler. I hustle. Because, I mean,
Every day I'm hustling.
the range of things that I do is really, I mean, it don't fit any description. I mean, I could, if I list all the things that I do, it wouldn't fit a normal description. So yeah, I mean, I agree with Niku in that respect, that they wouldn't know exactly what I do.
So with that being said, let me ask you, because you have more knowledge than most people who are even analyzing the music right now. What is the relationship between dancehall, hip hop, reggae, reggaeton? What you call it? Reggae,
Reggaeton?
reggaeton, and Afrobeats.
All right. The sound system culture is very important in development of modern Jamaican music. In fact, that is a cradle of modern Jamaican music, the sound system. The sound system started in Jamaica in earnest with a man by the name of Tom Wong. They called him the Great Sebastian. He was a haberdasher, you know, he sold pots and pans and glasses and cups and that kind of thing, and zinc. And he had his store at Luke Lane and Charles Street in Kingston. And Tom Wong was somebody who wanted to attract patrons, customers to his store. And he thought that setting up some speaker boxes and playing music was a way of attracting people to his store. And what that did was really entertain people, and the curious would come into the store and look around and would often buy. And then Tom realized that this could be a bigger business. And rather than just using it for promotional purposes, he could actually hire out the sound. So he would start doing playouts, as they call it, where his set would go from place to place. And promoters would commission him, would hire him to come and provide music in a lawn, a space where they would provide recorded music. Because in days gone by, recorded music in Jamaica was not the trend. It was live bands. But these were big bands that were playing American standards, not Jamaican music. But even when Tom started, the Jamaican music industry had not come into existence in any real way. And so what was happening is that Tom would be playing music from abroad. He would get a man by the name of Headley Jones, who was a great inventor. He invented one of the first solid state electric guitars in the world. And it was...
That's a Jamaican?
Yes, Headley Jones. He's now dead. And Headley also was the creator of a lot of the studios and a lot of the sound systems. He would help to build those things. So after Tom the Great Sebastian, you had people like Clement Dodd and Sir Coxsone and Duke Reid. And it was these people who really fashioned Jamaican music. Now, Coxon really has been credited in some instances as being the creator of modern Jamaican music. Of course, we had Mento, which was always there. But modern Jamaican music came about with the ska. The ska is the earliest form of modern Jamaican music. And most people refer to the song Easy Snapping with Theophilus Beckford, which features Beckford on piano and Ernest Ranglin on guitar as the first scat tune. And that was produced by Cox himself, Easy Snapping. And there were others like Prince Buster, who used to work with Coxon, and then he left and he started his own sound system, Voice of the People. And all of this was happening, but the source of the exclusive music, because what the sound systems used to do to distinguish themselves was to go abroad. The operators would go abroad and secure songs that weren't available in Jamaica, and they would scratch off the label and they would play it in the dances, and that would score big. But after a while, the music changed in America, and as a result, it wasn't fitting the mood and the rhythm of Jamaica. And so the Jamaican sound system operators, they decided that they were going to start creating their own records in order to distinguish themselves in the dancehall. So when you have a sound clash or anything like that, it was a matter of who could come with exclusive records. And what was happening is that these sound system operators, they started out paying singers to come with exclusive songs for them, right? So they get the exclusive songs. And when they get the exclusive songs, they would play that on their sound systems. But after a while, the guys start realizing, but no, we don't need to make these things just exclusive, because we can sell them, because they saw the response in the dance. And the people were getting their record players, buying their record players and things. And there were what you call jukeboxes, where people could access records. So after a while, these sound system operators realized that they could make a living from selling the records, not just playing them in the dance hall for their own sound systems. So that was an important point of departure for the music, and the music evolved from ska to rocksteady to reggae to dancehall. And from the and what happened is that the dancehall was a kind of laboratory. So it was experimentation going on. So the selectors, for example, that's how DJing really came into being, and toasting, because you would have these selectors talking over the records and trying to outmaneuver their competitors, with jive talk. Originally, sometimes it didn't make much sense. It was gibberish.
Yeah.
But it added some distinction to the music and created a vibe. And then the sound system operators, but hold on, who are now becoming record producers, start saying, but hold on, man. But these guys are saying something different. It's a different form of music. with this gibberish, and then people like UROI, that's how they came into being, right? And so you get a UROI coming on a tune, a John Holt tune, like, I mean, We're to the Ball. And that's how you get that. And that moved along until the DJs or the selectors didn't really need to be on a song with a singer. They started to be recorded by themselves. And that was, again, due to advances in technology, where, you know, multi-tracking and all of these things. And so sometimes when you have a song, you'd create a rhythm and you'd have the singer on it, and you'd have a DJ, and you'd have maybe 4 other people or 5 other people. I mean, it cut costs because it's one session with musicians, and then you can put on these many songs. And it is that same experiment where, you know, people are toasting over recorded music in the dance that gave rise to hip hop. Clive Campbell, a Jamaican, went to New York in the Bronx. He and his sister were having a party in 1973. And what he had learned in Jamaica in terms of, you know, talking over the instrumental breaks on the music, he applied it in New York, except in this time, he had to jettison the Jamaican accent and, you know, they would take on something different, you know. So people would be talking with an American accent over the recordings. And it was the scratching and the things which would come after that. But it was really an offshoot of the Jamaican way of music production, which was, it started in a dance hall in Jamaica, and it started in a party in the Bronx where Kool Herc was using the same techniques that he had seen being used in Jamaica. And that's how hip hop really came into being. Now, reggaeton is a different thing, in the sense that there was always this music form called reggae en español. And you had people like Nando Boom and El General, people mostly from Panama and you know, Central and South America. And they were really translating songs literally from the dancehall. So they would mean El General would be doing some Beenie Man songs or some Bounty Killer songs in Spanish, you know. But I think what happened was that after a while, Steely and Clevie, they did a rhythm called Fish Market. And on that rhythm, you had a song called Kommon Jam.
Kommon Jam. Yeah.
And what happened subsequently was that Bobby Digicel, now both Bobby Digicel and Steely and Clevie were with King Jammy. They worked for a while with King Jammy. In fact, Jammy was instrumental in starting Bobby Digicel's career and enhancing Steely and Clevie's. And Bobby Digicel did a version of the Fish Market. He did a reprise of the Fish Market, he did a remix of it with a song called Dembow with Shabba Ranks. And it is Dembow, that rhythm, that is the basis of reggaeton. And it is the source of a major lawsuit that is taking place right now because Steely and Clevie and their estate are claiming that their music has been used without their getting proper compensation. And it's hundreds of songs that they say have incorporated the fish market rhythm. So it's a Puerto Rican music model because reggaeton is primarily, most of the big stars, you know, of reggaeton have come out of Puerto Rico, you know. But that is where reggaeton is now. Afrobeat is really again, it has been affected by the influence of reggae and dancehall, which was really one of the preeminent music of Afro descent, people of Afro descent or African descent. And that music is infused with a lot because, you know, Jamaican artists are very popular and have been very popular in Africa. The liberation struggles in Africa against apartheid. People like Bob Marley and Peter Tosh and so many others were instrumental in dismantling that racist system in Southern Africa. And so the Africans, the freedom fighters, and the Africans in general, they look to Jamaican acts for inspiration. And so it was natural that elements of our music would be incorporated in Afrobeat. Now, interestingly, our music is coming from Africa. So the music has
returned
full circle.
Full circle.
Yeah, full circle.
So that is one of the things about music and culture, because you see there's a lot of borrowing and there's a lot of what we call cross-fertilization. So American music influences us. We influence American music. American music influences British. British music influence America, and so on. And that's how it is.
The next big question is now social media. The impact on social media and the disadvantage and advantage within the industry.
Well, I spoke a bit about social media and some of the advantages and disadvantages before. The thing is, the whole purpose of social media is to give access to more participants. What do I mean? So it's supposed to democratize the process of production and performance. Now, in days gone by, and this is why, for example, reggae artists used to be given a bad rap. In days gone by, Jamaican musicians, most of them, when I say musicians, I'm talking instrumentalists. These were people who could read music or trained in music. You know, the people who were playing for Cox and all of that. These were, if they were not even formally trained, they knew the rudiments and the technical details of music production, right? That is something that would be evident in a Jackie Mitua, a Jackie Jackson. All those people, Tom McCook, all those people who would be at studio sessions, right? They would have some knowledge of music. Many of them were jazz musicians. You know, they were trained at Alpha under Sister Ignatius and so on. they would have been privy to the proper techniques in terms of playing music and creating music. And then what happened is that when the thing shifted and, you know, there was more, because this, you will understand, was, sorry, the live band was really for the uptown people. So Sombrero Club, and so rich people and middle class people entertain themselves in clubs, while the lower class people entertain themselves in dance halls and lawns, right? And lawns. And what happened is that so you had a club would be uptown, so the Sombrero Club, the Glass Bucket Club, or these places, you know, these are clubs. But what has happened is that they would have live music, live bands, but the place for the lower class people, they didn't have these bands. They would have recorded music. So that's where the sound system was really for the poorer people, while the big bands and the were the more well-heeled. So that's one of the things about the music. So you would find that most of these people, as I said before, would have been who were playing recorded music were people who had a knowledge of the business. When you hear those scat bands that were playing this, the Scatolites and all that, these are great musicians, and many of them were trained in jazz and so on and so forth. So when the music changed to reggae, a lot of people who normally would not have been considered singers and musicians came onto the scene because music was more simplified. You know, I mean, people would criticize reggae and say it's a one-tone music. You know, it didn't have the kind of dynamism they thought of jazz, you know, with all these fancy drumming and, you know, or even scat, you know, which had that kind of musicianship. So you had that situation where people thought that reggae brought in people who would not have perhaps been able to qualify in a previous generation as musician and artist. And dancehall brought the level again and the access even more, because with DJing it means that people weren't looking at traditional ways of singing and vocal quality. So that was an opening again for another group of people to come in. And then technology has allowed other people to come into the game, so that, I mean, a Pro Tool where a man who normally, even as a DJ, wouldn't sound good, you know, you can play and auto-tune and do all the kind of things. So what technology does, and what you've seen in different iterations, is that more people are allowed, people who would not be considered skillful enough in a previous iteration are able to come forward and perform because of the technology available or because of the relative simplicity of the music form.
Now, good thing you say that. In the past, and even now, dancehall artists, the media has blamed dancehall artists for violence and all these things going on in society. What is what do you think about that?
We could have another program on that, because the discourse on that is long, and you know, there are so many varied opinions. All I will say is that art plays a very strange role in society. in that there are a number of things that art does for the society and creative people. One of the things that art does is it gives you the opportunity to immortalize the fleeting, the transient. So you have a beautiful woman and you see her, you try to capture that through art. So one of the things that art does is to capture moments and to ensure or attempt to ensure that that which is temporary or fleeting becomes permanent. And this is why, for example, you have so much reference to sexual act and sexual behavior, because the pleasure you derive even from sexual encounters are very brief. They're not very long and prolonged, but you can prolong them through your works of art. And so what you find is that people immortalize their experiences through art. That's one of the functions of art. One of the things is that art also provides an opportunity for role playing. So you might not be a bad man in real life, but you can be a bad man in your music. You might not be a girl's man in real life, but you become a girl's man in your music. So one of the things that art allows you to do is to role play. So, I mean, an artist who is a whip, him simply become a bad man and him shut up man and do all kind of things. He is encouraging violence, but what he's doing is really sometimes negotiating issues.
He's a good actor.
Right? So, for example, he might be somebody who is beaten up all the time, and he can't defend himself in real life, but he can defend himself in his music because he shot the man who beat him up all the time.
No.
So if you understand that function of art, then you will see that what is happening. And then sometimes, again, I mean, art is really cathartic, as they would say. It purges your system. So in other words, it sometimes prevents you from doing things you would perhaps do.
Talk about, yeah.
Because you're able to negotiate it through your art, and you're able to calm down and things like that. So art has a lot of functions, and of course it influences people. And so, while you might have a problem, and through your art you're trying to clean up yourself, and you're actually puking, and you're getting something off your chest, or you might be bathing upstream, you're washing off yourself upstream. But what happened to the man down at the bottom of the river? He's collecting all the dirt that you have washing down from your end of the river. And so that is one of the challenges that we have, because while you are negotiating all of your problems, I mean, how you are treated, and you are taking revenge on people who have hurt you through the music and all of that, you are also washing off yourself and purging yourself and relaxing yourself. But in doing so, you can be causing damage to people downstream, like youngsters, because who might be hearing your way of dealing with your problems, but they don't understand the context in which you are dealing with your problems.
Fiction.
You understand? They don't understand it's fiction and it's your way of just dealing with your thing, and then that affects them. So that's part of the challenge that you have. So the music does, I mean, it can affect you in different ways, because one man can hear a song from an artist who might sound as if he promotes violence or certain kinds of sexual behavior, and that song might influence a child negatively to behave in a particular way. But it might also cause that child to go to church. So there's no one-to-one correspondence in terms of how a song or music might affect somebody. You can see whether it's statistically significant. In other words, if you see it have a certain effect on a significant number of people, then you can maybe draw a conclusion. Because up until now, we have not really had a definitive study to say exactly what causal link there is between music and violence. You know, there might be a correlation, but we have not been able to establish definitively, even though we in ourselves recognize that there is some kind of relationship between violent lyrics and behavior in the society.
Listen, it's halfway full and halfway empty. But you know what? Let me ask you another question, because I realize that question can go so many different ways right now.
Yes,
it's like a tree with many leaves.
Yes.
So dancehall and culture, what's the significance to Jamaica?
Well, I mean, the dancehall is a forum for what academics call, it's a forum for identity formation. What do I mean by that? The dancehall is a space in which we test trends. In other words, if you want to know if a particular style of dress, of behavior is acceptable, you have to go and test it in the dancehall, in the Jamaican society. You see? So if, for example, men want to wear certain kinds of clothes, I mean, tight clothes or anything like that, one of the spaces that they try to make sure that they try to legitimize what they're doing would be to go into the dance hall. All right? You want to wear earring as a man, one of the first places are barefoot pants, all of those places. One of the spaces that you go.
Are bleach out.
Bleach out. You go into the dance hall to get legitimized. If you are legitimized in the dance hall, then you can carry it outside. If it is proscribed in the dance hall and it's not approved in the dance hall, then you have a challenge. And one of the reasons is that in the dance hall, that space, you sometimes have people who can enforce certain kinds of behavior. So if you go in there and you get approval from certain people who can back up certain behavior because of their ability to project force, then you're all right. So if you dance, I mean, in a certain way, and a man said, well, that look effeminate, man, but the rude boy said, no, man, that's all right. Then you're all right. So the dance hall is a place to secure legitimacy. You know, in other words, to get approval for certain kinds of behavior. So it is a space where people form identity. What is usually, I mean, you want to hear how conservatives Jamaicans are, you go into the dancehall space because they will tell you what kind of behavior is not allowed in private and in public, and what they deem to be deviant and not to be subscribed to.
In other words, the dancehall commandments, eh?
They're made. The commandments are made in the dancehall. For that's where the trends are set. So I think that is a good note to wrap up on.
Yeah.
Common sense make it make sense, and there you have it. And perfect example. You don't have to comment on this one. We're seeing the politician using dancehall for their own purposes at this point in time as well.
Well, let's face it, music has always been used as a means of affecting behavior, and politics is about affecting human behavior. So music, there's perhaps fewer, I can't think of any more powerful a more powerful means of reaching people and of affecting their behavior than through music. So I think that is where we can sign off with it.
Definitely.
For now. Another time. But I think
Yeah, man, definitely appreciate your stuff by Clyde. You know, on behalf of Common Sense, just want to thank you for answering all the questions and sticking around. But, you know, folks, thanks for tuning in. Common Sense, make it make sense. Join us again next time as we delve into some very interesting topics. Have a great day.
Thank you.